Welcome. This video is documenting the prediction that famous singer-songwriter Paul Simon of Simon and Garfunkel will slip and fall and severely injure his head on December 19th, 2025. The post date on the social media platform that you are watching this video on proves that this prediction is being made ahead of time, as does this time-stamped email and forensic notes PDF document. If you are skeptical for some reason, please email me and I will forward these to you. If you have already watched this introductory information regarding November 27th, you can skip ahead no more than precisely 10 minutes. Welcome. This video that you are watching was produced prior to November 27th, 2025, when prior to this date, it was predicted that Paul Simon of Simon and Garfunkel, the famous singer and songwriter, would slip and fall and severely injure his head on this November 27th, 2025 date, Thanksgiving. This is because God's signs, his true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections, which is only being explained on this channel, overwhelmingly indicated that November 27th would be extremely important regarding this trail of signs leading to the date that Paul Simon will slip and fall and injure his head, which is now predicted to be December 19th, 2025, 22 days after November 27th. That's why the clear and relevant signs that occurred on November 27th that related to Paul Simon revealed adding 22 more days to reach December 19th. The signs we received on November 27th are explained in other videos in more detail. But for the sake of this introduction here, I will briefly describe them. But before I do, the key thing to understand here is that when Paul Simon slips and falls and injures his head on December 19th, it will prove that all of the analysis in this video for November 27th is 100% correct and true. That's the purpose of this prediction. In other words, the reason why God does this, why he lays out a trail of signs, it is in order to elaborate on the prophetic signs, because none of the prophetic signs can be properly or fully understood without their context and connections to the other prophetic signs. It is through these connections and context that God is able to tell these stories and themes. And God does this in order to relay extremely important information and knowledge that everyone needs to know. And everyone needs to know how and why God pointed in advance to November 27th, why he did so. And it is explained in these videos that talk about God pointing to November 27th. Now, the skeptic will say, oh, well, you know, he didn't slip and fall on that day. You were wrong. No. When the prediction comes to pass on December 19th, 22 days later, it will prove all of the analysis for November 27th. And therefore, it will prove that God was indeed pointing to November 27th regarding the slip and fall and injury of his head of Paul Simon. And therefore, all of the knowledge that's contained in these stories that were told in the lead up to November 27th are extremely important. And that's why when the prediction comes to pass, the wise person will recognize that they need to watch every minute of every video on this channel, including all of the videos that predicted November 27th. It was not quote unquote wrong. It was 100% correct. And that will be proven to be true when Paul Simon slips and falls and injures his head on December 19th. Now, why the 22 days from November 27th? Well, one of the signs we received on that day was the first American Pope's first trip abroad to 2 nations. And on the plane flight, the news story was that he was gifted the historic bat used by player number 2. The Chicago White Sox player number 2 was gifted to the Pope, the first American Pope, on his first trip abroad to 2 nations. There's much more to that. He was on, for example, his way to the 1700s anniversary celebration of the Nicene Creed. And on that day, one of the 2 National Guardsmen died, who was shot on 17th Street. And on, as explained in the other video. So we have the 2 and 2, number 2's bat and the 2-nation trip. The first American Pope from Chicago hints at the first black president from Chicago, and on and on. And the Pope and Obama are the 2 antichrists, except the first of the 2 antichrists, the Pope, is not Pope Leo, but will be Pope Francis, who will, or is predicted to become or be resurrected in April 2029. That's another subject. Okay, so we have, anyway, the 2 antichrists identified once again in God's signs. Now, Paul Simon was known to be an avid baseball fan. That's one reason why this is relevant. Also, his head injury is symbolic of people's heads being injured and their brains being injured from the things. You know what I'm talking about, the things. And the components in the things make their way to people's brains. And that will ultimately lead to demonic possession, and on, as explained in countless other Paul Simon videos. But the mark of the Antichrist, which is the thing, is symbolized by the number 22 in God's signs. And the Antichrists, the 2 Antichrists, will enforce the mark of the Antichrist. The reason why the mark of the Antichrist is symbolized by the number 22 is because the inverse of the mark of the Antichrist is described in the book of Ezekiel, which would have been a Tav mark, and the Tav letter in the Hebrew alphabet is the last and 22nd letter of the Hebrew alphabet. The mark of the Antichrist is described in the last and 22nd book out of 22 books in the Bible that have a total of 22 chapters. Also, the mark of the Antichrist alters a person's chromosomes, and chromosomes come in pairs, and each chromosome has 2 arms, and so 2 and 2, 22. Now, another sign we received on this date was the death of Fuzzy Zoeller, the famous Hall of Famer golfer, professional golfer, Fuzzy Zoeller, who was known for making, and never lived it down for the rest of his life, his racist comment after he had finished the Masters and while Tiger Woods was still playing the Masters on his way to winning his first Masters tournament. The first black player to win the Masters. Again, hints at the first black president, Antichrist. Also, Tiger Woods is the GOAT, greatest of all time, and that hints at the GOAT Antichrist. Now, Fuzzy Zoeller was one of 2 players in the modern era to win the Masters in their first year as a professional. The other player was Tiger Woods. And Tiger Woods is known for his big comeback when he won the Masters 22 years after he first won the Masters in his first year as a professional. And so that's why the death of Fuzzy Zoeller also reveals adding 22 days. Now, there's so much more that's so amazing regarding all of this that is, for one thing, explained in the must-watch, as if all of them are must-watch, as you should know. 2 National Guardsmen shot, 2-nation trip by the Pope video regarding Paul Simon. Okay, so I'll leave it at that. That's the introduction here. Again, like I said, God was pointing to November 27th ahead of time. So the rest of this video will talk about how and why God pointed to November 27th ahead of time. And all of the analysis is 100% correct when the prediction comes to pass 22 days later on December 19th. And so Don't be confused when in this video later on I talk about how Paul Simon is predicted to slip and fall on November 27th. God was saying that. That's what God was saying. It was not, quote unquote, wrong, quote unquote. It was 100% correct. Okay, God was saying that Paul Simon would slip and fall on November 27th. But the way it works, and this is how it works, and I know far better than you or anyone how it works, is that it's not necessarily possible to know ahead of time, ahead of the date that God is pointing to, whether or not it will be the end of the trail of signs for that prediction or another step in the trail. And so November 27th was pointed to, and it was for Paul Simon's trail, and it ended up being a step. Now December 19th might be a step. But at this time, we're going to go with the prediction that Paul Simon will slip and fall and injure his head on December 19th. If it doesn't happen, you can rest assured there will be clear and relevant signs related to it on December 19th. And that said, enjoy the rest of the video. It must be watched. It's extremely important information, all of these videos. Simon is predicted to fall and severely injure his head at the age of 84. The name Obama is equal to 84 in Hebrew gematria, and Simon is Jewish. The news of Simon's head injury is predicted to be 48 days, which hints at 84, after Diane Keaton died. Keaton's maiden name is Hall, and she won the Academy Award for Best Actress for her role in the movie Annie Hall. In fact, Woody Allen, I'm sure of it, got the name Annie Hall from Diane Keaton, because Annie rhymes with Diane. That's a typo. It's not Diana Keaton, it's Diane Keaton. And her maiden name was Hall, and so that's why Annie Hall. But this is a sign from God because of this theme, like I'm explaining, regarding mansions and halls. Because in the movie The Shining, for example, like I just mentioned, the demonic possession is highlighted in the ballroom hall in the hotel. So, Keaton's maiden name is Hall, and she won the Academy Award for Best Actress for her role in the movie Annie Hall. Paul Simon met Shelley Duvall on the movie set of Annie Hall. And Simon broke up with Duvall at the airport before she flew to the UK to film the movie The Shining about a haunted hotel and ballroom hall. By the way, the airport, as in portal, is part of this theme of the door and the bridge that will be unlocked with a key to the bottomless pit from which the demons will cross over through and demonically possess people, as described in one of the trumpet judgments that follow the sound of silence in heaven. And so that's why Simon broke up with her at the airport before she flew to film the movie The Shining, which is about a haunted hotel and ballroom hall. And that's why he met Duvall during the movie set of Annie Hall. It's so clever, but there's something extremely profound that's going on here. The murders in the Overlook Hotel, the name of the hotel in the movie The Shining. And by the way, The Shining was written by Stephen King, and in the demonic possession prophecy, after the demons cross over, is a description of the King Apollyon, which is the same as Apollo. And Paul Simon sings about Apollo 11. And he sang an American tune about Apollo 11, 9 days, as in Revelation 9:11, describing King Apollyon, King Apollo, in other words, Satan. He sang Apollo 11 at the pre-inaugural ball on the date 1/19, January 19th, which hints at 9/11. He sang about Apollo 11, 9 days before Stephen King's book The Shining was published. All right. The murders in the Overlook Hotel in The Shining are a prophetic sign that pointed to the hall in the Wannsee House that overlooks the lake near Berlin that the Nazis used to formulate the final solution. Simon sang about the King of Rock's Graceland mansion. The Antichrist is a murderer, and he will reside in the White House mansion that has 132 rooms. And Trump is currently adding a ballroom hall to the White House. Okay? Let's just pause here for a second to elaborate a little bit. The movie, The Shining, has in it embedded by the director Kubrick the number 42. But contrary to what the conspiracy theorists say, Kubrick did not do this intentionally. First of all, in the movie, the kid and the mother, Shelley Duvall, are watching the movie Summer of 42. Now, the reason why Kubrick included this movie, which is a famous movie that was made before The Shining was made, is because of the theme of the movie, not because of the number 42. The theme of the movie is child abuse. The theme of the Summer of 42, that I should say. Sexual child abuse, which is part of this plot of the movie The Shining. Okay? Now also, in one of the scenes, the boy, Danny, wears a shirt with the number 42 on his shoulders. But that was random. The crew had gathered before the filming a whole pile of clothes that Danny could possibly wear, and that shirt was just simply chosen. Now, also, in the movie, there are, as people have pointed out, which of course is an accident, there are 40, not of course, I don't mean to belittle the conspiracy theorists, but what I'm saying is that this is all from God and not from Kubrick. There are 42 cars in the parking lot in the opening scene, which we see from above the Overlook Hotel. We can see 42 cars in the parking lot. Now, the famous iconic room, which is one of the most cited things in movie history, the room 237 in the movie. Well, that wasn't Kubrick's original intention. He intended it to be room 137, but the hotel that he was filming at in the UK objected because they actually had a room 137 and they didn't have a room 237. And so that's why Kubrick changed it to 237. But coincidence has it that 2 times 3 times 7 equals 42. Okay, and of course there's another coincidence, which is from God, which is that the sweater, one of the sweaters Danny wears is of Apollo 11, which was the mission to the moon, and on average the moon is 237,000 miles away from Earth. But that's not because Kubrick filmed the landing of the moon. Contrary to what the conspiracists believe, it's from God. And the prediction will prove this. That's the purpose of this prediction. I know more than you do the reason and purpose for this prediction. The moon landing wasn't staged by Kubrick. Yes, there's a coincidence here, but it's from God. It's a prophetic sign. And why is all of this 42? What's the theme of the movie? It's demonic possession. It's about murder. But also, if you look carefully into what Kubrick was doing, was he was communicating subtly the reason why the hotel was haunted, which was that it was built on top of a cemetery of Native Indians, sacred burial ground. And so it's about the slaughter. The theme, the hidden theme is the slaughter, the mass murder, the genocide of the Native Americans. which is pointing to the genocide of the Jews in the Holocaust that began with the final solution in the mansion, in the hall, in the year 42. Okay? That's the true reason for these coincidences in the movie The Shining. What's confusing, which is part of God's thing here, is that Kubrick was known for placing Easter eggs in his movies. But it's the same with Back to the Future. Robert Zemeckis was also known for doing such things, yet God used that aspect of Zemeckis and Kubrick to communicate these prophetic signs. Okay? Yes, it's all from God, in other words, even Zemeckis and Kubrick themselves. So, back to this subject here. What we have is that God is communicating the Wannsee Hotel, the Overlook Hotel, because the Wannsee House overlooked, which is why the Nazis chose it. The mansion used as a conference center hotel it was popular because it overlooked the lake. And the name of the hotel in the movie The Shining is the Overlook Hotel. So, in other words, the Overlook Hotel is pointing to the overlooking mansion house, the Wannsee House, with its hall that the Nazis used, which is why the demonic possession in the hall, the ballroom hall, in the movie The Shining. And The Shining is a word, a euphemism for demonic possession in the movie. That's what The Shining is in the movie. And that's why Paul Simon's hit, the first line of the song Graceland is, the Mississippi Delta was shining like a national guitar. And why Paul Simon sang American Tune about Apollo 11, 9 days before the published Stephen King's book, The Shining, because it points also to Elvis, the king of rock, who died at 42 years old in his mansion because of King Apollyon in Revelation 9:11, that's describing the demonic possession of those who take the thing and get the components from the thing into their brains, which will be triggered by frequencies, as in music, as in Prince of the Power of the Air, euphemism for Satan in the Bible, and that will facilitate demonic possession, the delta brainwaves. And those who refuse to take the mark, the thing, will be on the receiving end of a politicized genocide, which has been unfolding for many years. We are in the latter stages. You can look this up online, the 10 stages of genocide. We are well past stage number 5. With the blue team, the left, the demon cats, and their persecution of their true enemies, true conservatives, and true Christians. And that's what's happening. That's what's described also in Bible prophecy, that there will be a genocide of Christians and Jews in the last days. Okay? So that's where it's all headed here. And that's what God's communicating through all of this story here. So where was I in this paragraph now? We're talking about the mass murder, which is what the theme of The Shining is, like I have now explained, which is why it is all about the number 42, because it points to the mass murder of the final solution implemented, formalized in the year 42 in the mansion, in the hall. Okay. Now, the thing is that God, how will God approve all of this? Through the prediction. How do I know this prediction ahead of time? Through this 84 days. 48 days. Why is this relevant? Well, Paul Simon will die at the age of 84, and 84 identifies the Antichrist, as I explained. 48 days before Paul Simon's predicted news of his fall was the death of Diane Keaton. Well, why is she relevant? Well, because she points to Shelley Duvall in the movie Annie Hall, whom Simon met while filming Annie Hall together, and then he broke up with her before she departed at the airport to film the movie The Shining. Okay? Now, so that's why Diane Keaton died when she did, to point to Paul Simon's fall, or at least the news of it, on November 28th. Now, so the 48 days. Now, Diane Keaton, here's the thing. The Antichrist is a murderer, and he will reside in a White House mansion that has 132 rooms, which is 44 plus 44 plus 44. And the Antichrist is the 44th president. And Trump is currently adding a ballroom hall to the White House, which is a play from God on the ballroom hall demonic possession in the movie The Shining. Diane Keaton died exactly 13 plus 2 months after Shelley Duvall died, which hints at the number 132 in the mansion and the ballroom hall. And the additional one room, which by the way gives us 133 symbolically, because maybe there'll be more than one room in the ballroom hall, but that's irrelevant. It's just now 133 that God's pointing to, and that is the 44th semi-prime number. Now, Duvall died in Blanco, Texas, and Blanco is Spanish for white. And this hints at the White House mansion that has 132 rooms, because we have, from the death of her in Blanco, 13 plus 2 months, exactly, to the death of Diane Keaton. I mean, they died on the same day of the month, July 11th and then October 11th. She died in Blanco, Texas, which is coincidentally only a few miles from the mansion where Simon recently moved to due to his wife being from Texas, not because Shelley Duvall lives there. Now, 13 plus 2 months is also 15 months. And Simon's most recent album, 7 Psalms, that he made at his house in Texas, is his 15th solo album. California is the 31st state, and 31 is the 11th prime number. Duvall died the 31st prime number of days after prosecutors in the 11th state, New York, abruptly dropped the criminal case against 3 men accused of conspiring to possess and sell stolen handwritten lyrics to the Eagles' hit song, Hotel California. Okay, now, this is a sign that we expected in advance of this March 6th, 2024 date. And again, we knew it was going to be a Paul Simon sign. Not only are the Eagles baby boomer musicians in the 70s like Paul Simon, but the Hotel California hints at the hotel overlook and this mansion theme. Furthermore, the Hotel California is a euphemism for prison, spiritual prison. It speaks of it. There's a lyric in it talking about how you can check in, but you can't check out. It's a prison. And in the trumpet judgment, the demons are released from the bottomless pit, which is a prison. Okay, now, God uses this number frequently in his signs, H188. Because 188, because H180 in the Hebrew concordance is the word for woe exclamation mark. The case regarding Hotel California was dropped on March 6, 2024. The exact 188th anniversary of the collapse of the walls of security in the Battle of the Alamo. And we knew that ahead of time that God was pointing to March 6, 2024 because of this 188th anniversary. And that's because we knew Paul Simon had recently moved to Wimberley, Texas, which is near the Alamo. But it's also this theme in God's signs of walls of security collapsing, which is also what happened on 9/11, when the towers collapsed and engendered a small earthquake that cracked the foundation of Federal Hall on Wall Street, and on, okay? Now, the Alamo is located a few miles from where Duvall died and where Simon currently lives. This story about the original handwritten lyrics to Hotel California relates to Paul Simon, who is known to be the GOAT, greatest of all time, of American pop music composition. And this sign is about the composition on the handwritten lyrics papers that were allegedly stolen. And both Don Henley and Simon are baby boomer musicians. Simon's 15th solo album is 7 Psalms, and the Hotel California prophetic sign on the 188th anniversary of the Alamo was exactly 15 weeks after a vehicle drove at a high speed before jumping into the air at the Rainbow Bridge Customs Crossing in the 11th state, I should add. And again, this was a lawsuit brought in the 11th state. Now, 15 weeks is also 2,520 hours, which is the prophetic number of days in Daniel chapter 9 that symbolizes the end times period. And we are already inside the last 20 days, and because it is only symbolic. Those that are looking for some sort of thing to happen to be obvious to all those who know, have the insider wisdom that the end times have begun, well, sorry, it's only symbolic. We are already inside it. That's one of the controversial things that I'm talking about, which is a fact when the prediction comes to pass. Don't want to get into that anymore. Now, the thing is that, so we have the 15 weeks connecting to the Hotel California sign from the jumping of the car into the air at the Rainbow Bridge, okay? And Simon again produced his album Near the Alamo, and it's his 15th solo album, okay? Now, the occupants in the car that jumped into the air and then crashed into a fiery explosion at the Rainbow Bridge, which, by the way, cost $4 million to make, and bridge is the same symbol as a door. Door is the 4th letter of the Hebrew alphabet, and they were on their way to a KISS concert, which is 4 letters, and KISS concerts are known for their musicians dressing up as demons, and demons will cross through the door, the bridge, from the bottomless pit to demonically possess people. Okay, now, so anyway, the KISS founder, Gene Simmons, took his performer name from Jumpin' Gene Simmons, whose only hit song was Haunted House. Jumpin' Gene Simmons opened concerts for Elvis Presley while they were both with Sun Records in Memphis, which is where Elvis's mansion is, and some people claim that his mansion is haunted. Okay, Elvis Presley famously covered Simon's Bridge Over Troubled Water. Again, the demons will cross over the bridge. And Simon sang about Presley's mansion in the 4 times 4th state. The car that crashed at the bridge cost $4 million to build, was on its way to a KISS concert, and it jumped, as in Jumpin' Gene Simmons, into the air 188 days after the release of Simon's 15th album, 7 Psalms. And again, that's relevant because the jump at the bridge connects to the 188th anniversary of the Alamo. And the Alamo was sieged for 13 days. Again, the owl died at the age of 13. And Simon is associated with 13, one reason being he was born on the 13th day of the month, but also his song America, which is symbolized by the number 13, 13 colonies. In other words, the collapse of the walls of security of Alamo was symbolic of the collapse of the walls of security of America, which was warned of on 9/11, which is also what Paul Simon symbolizes. And so, now the jumping of the car at the $4 million bridge on its way to a KISS concert, which is 4 letters, was also the exact 2 times 30th anniversary of President Lincoln being shot in the head in a car. That car had its peak of popularity in the 1960s, and the assassination of Lincoln was the first of 4 famous political assassinations, or infamous, in the 1960s. His brother, Martin Luther King, and Malcolm X. Martin Luther King, I should say, in the 4 times 4th state near the mansion of Elvis's, the King of Rocks. Okay. And he was assassinated on the date 4/4 in the 4 times 4th state, Martin Luther King Jr. Okay. Now, but the reason why the connection for Lincoln, and the car he was assassinated in was a Lincoln, a Ford Lincoln Continental, which was known for its 4 suicide doors. Exactly 2 times 30 years later was the suicidal crash of the car that jumped and crashed into the customs at the bridge. It was said to be suicidal, and it connects with the suicide doors, the 4 of them in the Lincoln who was shot in the head. Well, the 4 times 4th president was also shot in the head in Ford Theater. And his name is Lincoln, which is why the Ford Lincoln car in which Kennedy was shot in the head. This all points to Elvis, who fell and hit his head in his mansion and then died in his bathroom in his mansion in the 4 times 4th state, and Paul Simon, who is predicted to fall and hit his head. That's why the connection from Jumpin' Gene Simmons. But it also connects, as I said, to Elvis, which connects to Paul Simon. Furthermore, Simmons hints at Simon. Jumpin' Gene Simmons. And Gene Simmons, the founder of KISS, hints at Simon. The reason for Gene is because it is the genes that people get altered through taking the thing, which makes them marked, which is why it is a mark of the Antichrist. And it'll put the things inside their brains which will lead to demonic possession, which is why Jumpin' Gene Simmons' only hit was Haunted House. Do you see how it all is so amazing and connects? Now, the thing is, we had now, as I've explained, the connection from the Jumping Gene Simmons sign, the car that jumped into the air suicidally, into the $4 million bridge at the rainbow, and God's sign regarding judgment in the Bible is the rainbow. And that was 188 days after the release of Paul Simon's album, the 15th album, 7 Psalms. And again, the jumping car was exactly 15 weeks before the 188th anniversary. So you see, 15th album, 188 days, 15 weeks, 188th anniversary of the Alamo, which is near where the 15th album was produced. Okay? Now, so the British Ensemble Voices 8 is the guest on the album, and again, 8 is 4 plus 4, and the album was released 4 years, 4 months, and 4 days after Simon had his prophetic dream in which a voice, as in Voices 8, instructed him to make the album. And here's the thing. Elvis changed history. The King of Rock changed history when he took the polio thing in front of the press before he went on to the Ed Sullivan stage at the Ed Sullivan show, which is incidentally why the, what's his name, Colbert, has his show in the Ed Sullivan show, and he was known for promoting the thing during the days of the rollout of the thing and for mocking those who didn't take it. It's because he is evil, and those that laughed with him are also evil, and they are on their way to hell. And the reason for saying that is to warn them so that they don't and change their ways. And repent. And get yourself out of the bubble of information that is the blue team. And wean yourself off of the propaganda and the lies which you love. And that's the truth. Spiritually, you know it's lies. You know the left is constantly propaganda. You know the things that they accuse the other side of are the things that they are in fact doing. If you don't know that, you have a bigger problem. But spiritually, you love the lies. And why is that? Because the truth is, you are spiritually in rebellion against God. That's the truth. And you will go to hell. So, time to repent. Immediately, you are in big trouble. And I'm not talking about Colbert. I'm talking about those who like Colbert or love to get the lies from the left media. Later in his career, okay, we're talking about Elvis again, after he took the thing and again changed history because he made it cool for baby boomers, which is the generation that shaped all of history, right? Because of the bulge of the demographic. They revolutionized the thing industry because they, prior to Elvis taking the thing, were skeptical and reluctant of these things, which is a lie. I mean, the lie is that, for one thing, that it eradicated polio, which it didn't. Okay, that's another subject, though. And you need to know this information, and you don't know it because, well, you get your media from the small insulated bubble of information, which is the mainstream left media. Okay? You need to stop that right away. You need to stop consuming that media right away and start learning things. It's all propaganda. There's multiple reasons for it. One of them is corruption, because it's all bought and paid for by the thing industry. I mean, for example, the second biggest industry in terms of dollars for lobbying in Washington is the oil industry. The first one is double the amount of dollars from the pharma ends with the pharmaceutical industry. That industry spends double the amount of the second place industry in lobbying. Do you not think that that would cause, over time, the regulatory agencies to become captive? Which is, of course, what God's voice for truth, RFK Jr., has been talking about, connecting us back to the JFK, who was shot in the head. It's all full circle, because RFK, the reason why he has an issue with his voice, physically, is because he is symbolic of God's voice for truth regarding this matter. And if you've been consuming the propaganda trying to make RFK Jr. look bad, I feel sorry for you, because you have no idea what's going on, and you are completely a sheep, and you're completely a fool. And it's because over time, over decades, step by step, incrementally, you have chosen the wrong path by continually building up your worldview with one lie after another. It starts out small. For example, there is no God. And then it just builds on that to the point where it's probably pretty difficult for you to now change your worldview and see the truth through the lies. Because your whole worldview and your whole brain, your whole mind has been constructed on lies. To tear down one lie means to destruct the entire thing. And you are going to have such a difficult time doing this. But if you don't, you are going to go to hell. Wake up. Start to unravel the lies. The mountain of lies that supports the mountain of lies on top of lies. It's going to be very difficult for you to do. But you got to start somewhere at some time. And you got to do it. You got to have the courage to do it. And it's going to take courage. It's difficult to change one's worldview because it is extremely uncomfortable. But you're going to have to unravel all of the lies, and it's going to be painful for you. But you get what you asked for. A long time ago, you began adding lie after lie to your worldview. And you're going to have to suffer the consequences now. But better do it now than after you die. Okay, back to Elvis. So he took the thing, it changed history, the baby boomers changed history, and later in his career, Elvis was at the Space Needle in Seattle, the 42nd state, getting us back to the Wannsee and the genocide in the year 42, the final solution, which is all a metaphor, it's all symbolic, it's all a type for what's coming, it's all a warning for what's coming. Okay, so in King County, no less, actually Seattle is King County, the king of rock went to the Space Needle in King County in the 42nd state, and he died in his mansion at the age of 42, okay, but he went to the Space Needle after he took the needle. And he went there to film the movie It Happened at the World's Fair. Okay, and Elvis died in his mansion in the 4x4th state due to the head injury he suffered when he fell in his mansion in Los Angeles, which hints at fallen angels, in California, as in Hotel California. The prophetic sign about the song Hotel California, by the way, that sign coincided with another sign, which was the first announcement of a new album from the Doobie Brothers, the first in 44 years to feature Michael McDonald. And one of the albums, I forget, it's prophetic, but it has an image on the cover art of 4 horses, as in the 4 apocalypse horses in the book of Revelation, under a broken bridge that was broken because of the earthquake, the most consequential in American history. Okay, it was an overpass. It was a bridge. It's all Simon symbolism there too. And again, Elvis died from a head injury in the 4x4th state because he fell 10 years earlier in his mansion in Los Angeles. Hotel California, okay? The prophetic sign about the song Hotel California on March 6, 2024 is also 90 weeks and 1 + 1 days before the predicted news on November 28th of Simon crashing and striking his head. This hints at the demonic possession of people through their brains after their genes, as in Gene Simmons, have been marked because of taking the thing that is described in Revelation 9:11 and King Apollyon. And Simon performed on Saturday Night Live 4 days after 9/11, when the 4th plane crashed with 44 deaths in a 40-degree angle in a 40-acre pit, 40 plus 40 miles outside of Pittsburgh, because the demons will emerge from the bottomless pit after the key opens the door. And Simon was born in 41. The word key is equal to 41 in simple English gematria. A equals 1, C equals B equals 2, C equals 3. And yeah, and the demonic possession will be a result of frequencies. And Paul Simon Elvis Presley and the Eagles, Hotel California, and the Doobie Brothers. It's all music, which is frequencies. One thing that I forgot to mention, just interesting, is that the Hotel California sign that I mentioned that occurred on March 6, 2024, that was 13 days after the 13-year-old owl slammed his head into a tower and then died. That's also relevant because eagles are a type of bird, a bird of prey, just like an owl is. Also, come to think of it, an owl hints at Barack Obama, who is known to be a night owl for being up late in the White House, in stark contrast with his predecessor, who was known for being an early bird. And God designed that contrast to highlight how Barack Obama is the night owl. But that's also prophetic because, well, now I'm getting off on a tangent, but the name Obama, well, sorry, the proper noun, capital B, Bama in the Bible, which means high place, which was a euphemism for the false religious worship that the Jews would conduct on the tops of mountains, is H 1117 in the Strong's Hebrew Concordance, 1117. Well, the first mention of the word owl in the Bible is Leviticus 11:17, and also Zechariah 11:17 describes the Antichrist. All right, I just want to add a couple of things to this segment of this video, this paragraph here, that I didn't write in this paragraph. Just thought to add that the first way in which this Thanksgiving was recognized that Paul Simon would die, or rather, I should say, fall and injure his head on this date, was revealed back in September of 2024, when Paul Simon performed a surprise concert in New York City. In the same 24 hours that we had a series of haunted mansion signs related to this theme we are talking about here. Okay, so in New York City, on September 24th, 2024, Paul Simon performed at night after sunset. In Israel, days begin after sunset, the calendar date after sunset. He performed a surprise concert. The following day, which would still be within the Hebrew calendar date, which is just getting really technical here, but anyway, was the day that the mayor of New York City was indicted for alleged fraud or corruption regarding the embassy of Turkey. Now, the embassy itself is part of this mansion theme because it's a big building, it's a dwelling, people live in it, etc. It's an embassy, it's part of this theme. That revealed Turkey Day. But I'll explain more why that revealed Turkey Day. There's more confirmation. Now, in this process of indicting the mayor, who, by the way, is himself prophetic because he is the first black mayor of New York City. And God uses these firsts in general for prophetic signs. And in this case, the first black mayor hints at the first black president, the Antichrist. Now, also, to confirm this is Eric Adams, the mayor, was the 110th mayor of New York City, which is very prophetic because on 9/11 in New York City, 110 stories collapsed. Okay, so this is the 9/11 number, big time, but there's even more reason for it being relevant in the 9/11 signs, which I can't go off into explain everything. That's the difficulty when explaining God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections, because everything, the way it works is that it works on the principle of second and third and multiple witnesses confirming a matter, and it's a giant web, and when you try to explain one part of the web, you inevitably end up pulling the entire web. And so I'm not going to explain any more, which I really do need to explain the relevance of 110 in order to explain the relevance of Eric Adams, the mayor. Well, anyway, enough said. In the process of the indictment, the mayor's mansion was raided. But the name of the mansion that mayors of New York City live in is Gracie Mansion. It's like the White House. The tradition is for the president to live in the White House. Well, the tradition of mayors of New York City is to live in Gracie Mansion, which hints at the Graceland Mansion. And no doubt Paul Simon sang Graceland on that same calendar date. But not only that, we have more. Because on this same day, Jimmy Fallon, the host of the late night talk show that is recorded, well, no, let's see, is it? I'm not even sure if it's recorded in New York City or California, but regardless, because I don't watch that crap. Well, at least him and never mind. So anyway, Jimmy Fallon has a theme, an amusement attraction in New York City, which is a haunted house. I don't know the exact name of it. It's probably something like Jimmy Fallon's Haunted House or something like that. And on this same day, Jimmy Fallon broadcast a segment on his show of him and the Prince Harry, going through his mansion, his haunted mansion attraction, amusement attraction in New York City together. They went through the haunted house together and were scared by the various things within the haunted house, and that was all part of the segment on his show. Well, Prince Harry hints at the king of rock. And furthermore, Prince Harry and Prince William visited the King of Rock's Graceland Mansion estate. And the king, Elvis, died at the age of 42, and the date that they visited the estate was exactly 4,200 days before the White House mansion sign on October 31st, 2025. And that was the trumpeting how he had renovated the Lincoln bathroom named after the 4x4th president. And that was the same day this bathroom mansion sign, and Elvis died in his bathroom at the age of 42. This bathroom mansion sign that Trump trumpeted was also the same day that Trump delivered his first interview with CBS after the $4x4 million lawsuit. And again, Elvis's mansion is in the 4x4th state. And Trump's mansion, which is where he delivered this interview with CBS, is in the 9+9+9th state. And that date, October 31st, Halloween, okay, which is why Prince Harry was in the haunted mansion, Halloween theme. And this, again, this Trump mansion signs on October 31st, the date of Halloween, was 4,200 days exactly after Prince Harry was in Elvis's mansion, where he died at 42 in his bathroom. Okay, anyway, Trump's interview was in the 9+9+9th state, 9+9+9 days before it is predicted that Paul Simon will fall and injure his head in his bathroom, and Elvis ultimately died from the head injury he had suffered when he fell in his bathroom 10 years earlier. Okay. So that's the Prince Harry sign, the haunted mansion sign with Prince Harry on this September 25th, 2024 date. Now also, on this day, we had another related sign, which was the exclusive interview published in People.com magazine, People.com website, of the granddaughter of Elvis Presley. Keo, I don't know how to pronounce her name, Keo Presley, okay? And she is known for her acting career, in which she starred in a couple of horror movies that involved this theme of a mansion, including one that was inspired by the famous Alfred Hitchcock movie about the haunted mansion, about a mansion, I should say. And I apologize, I forget the name of that movie and all of that. But it was a very famous Alfred Hitchcock movie, and it's about a mansion. And anyway, so also the purpose of the interview was to follow up on how Keo Presley had completed the memoir autobiography of Lisa Marie Presley, Elvis's daughter, which was about the Graceland mansion. Okay, and this was again the day of the Gracie mansion indictment and all of that, okay? But it ultimately pointed to Halloween, and that's how I knew ahead of time that God was pointing to this past Halloween, October 31st, 2025, which I just briefly touched upon. But also at the same time, again, the indictment of Eric Adams was about was over the Turkey embassy, which hinted at Turkey Day, which follows Halloween. In this case, 9 + 9 + 9 days later. And that's also relevant with Eric Adams because God pairs 9 and 11 and also 9 and 110, and Eric Adams was the 110th mayor. Now, what's even more interesting is that at the time that Elvis Presley died in his mansion, in his bathroom, in Graceland, as in Gracie Mansion, as in Eric Adams, as in the Adams Family Mansion. Okay, so the show The Adams Family, this was recognized at the time as well. The indictment of Eric Adams, the mayor, and then his raid of his Gracie Mansion hinted at the Adams family, which is known. I mean, the whole plot of the show is their life inside their enormous mansion. Okay, so we got the Eric Adams connection to the mansion that way too. Well, the thing is that at the time that Elvis Presley died in his mansion, in his bathroom, he was reading a book authored by Frank Adams. And this is why God pointed to the Adams family and all this, is to point to the book that Elvis, the King of Rock, was reading, which was about the King of Kings, Jesus Christ. And the title of the book, authored by Frank Adams, is The Scientific Evidence for the Face of Jesus. The scientific evidence for the face of Jesus regarding the Turin Shroud, which for those who look into it will find that the truth is that it truly is the shroud that Jesus was wrapped in, contrary to what the secular mainstream pathetic media will propagandize. It's not even like an obscure conspiracy theory or something to that effect. I mean, the evidence is overwhelming and obvious. It's just not reported on. It's not reported on accurately also. It's a bunch of lies, because the truth is this world is ruled by Satan, and if you are following the mainstream culture, which refuses to acknowledge their creator because they're in truth in spiritual rebellion against him, well, then so be it, you know. But the evidence is overwhelming, and I'm not going to make this video about that. But what's also interesting is that the cloth, well, here's one of the interesting facts about the cloth, is that the scientists that studied it in the late 1970s, TARPA, the Turin Shroud scientific project, I forget what the acronym is, but anyway, you had the group of secular scientists studying the shroud, allowed to, with permission by the Vatican, in the, I think it was the late 1970s, maybe early 80s. And anyway, one of the things that was concluded is that they have no idea how the shroud was produced, the imprint, the markings. They know for sure that it wasn't applied with some kind of ointment or paint or something like that. In fact, the conclusion is that it must have been produced by intense light radiation, but they have no idea how that could have happened. Well, of course, we do know how it happened. It was the resurrection of Jesus Christ. And that's a fact, by the way. That's not controversial. The scientists don't know how the cloth was made, how the image was made, and the best guess is that it was produced by light radiation, which would mean that Jesus' face was shining. And here we bring into this theme again, the shining, which I've discussed in this paragraph here, with this mansion theme pointing back to the movie The Shining in order to point to the final solution. But we have a double meaning here, because Eric Adams points to the book that Elvis was reading when he died in his mansion, written by Frank Adams, about the shining face of Jesus Christ.